This podcast was produced by OAR FM Dunedin with support from New Zealand On the Air.
Hello and welcome to Heritage Matters, a program brought to you by the Southern Heritage Trust and sponsored by Heritage New Zealand. I'm Dougal Stevenson. In this program, Grego Campbell tells us about the first electricity generation in Otago. Judy Southworth reports on the 1945 visit to Dunedin by singer Gracie Fields. Sarah Gallagher updates us on local heritage news, and we hear about the man known as Otago's first poet. Power bills are going through the roof, and generators and retailers of electricity seem to be laughing all the way to the bank. However, this vital resource had humble beginnings on an Otago goldfield. This report from Grego Campbell.
The Phoenix gold mine at Skippers had a problem. It wasn't a lack of gold-bearing stone. It was a lack of power to crush it. Water power from the nearby stream was used, but it was unreliable with low flow and dry weather. The next stream over had more water and a more reliable flow. But the hauling of mined quartz over to it and the building of a haul road would raise the production cost and erode profits. On June 25, 1886, the Otago Witness published a report from a small party of travellers who'd braved the Skippers Road and made their way to the Phoenix mine. Thursday afternoon found us again in the saddle and following the tortuous windings of the Skippers Creek en route to the dynamo machines. Before leaving the battery, however, we had an opportunity witnessing a practical demonstration of the transmission of power by electricity. In the battery house, mounted on a strong wooden platform, was one of the Anglo-American Brush Company's Victoria dynamos, which had been fitted up as a motor. Standing by this machine, awaiting the starting of the generators situated at a waterfall 2 miles away, we were speculating on the wonders of electricity when, suddenly, as if by magic, the wheels of the motor began to move and then to buzz round with marvellous rapidity. The current had been switched on. The electric transmission of power at the Phoenix mine was an accomplished fact, and we were among the first to witness the success of what was perhaps the first experiment of the kind on a practical scale made in the Southern Hemisphere. A sharp canter over the terrace brings us to the dynamo house, and we at once proceed to make an inspection of the wonderful machinery. But before entering the building, we take the precaution of leaving our watches outside. It is not that we are afraid of pickpockets, or we would not leave them unprotected on a wheelbarrow, but the fact of the matter is that the electric machines play the very mischief with watches. We spent an hour or so in a very interesting way, watching the machinery and noting a few general facts in connection with it. The 2 large brush dynamo machines were at work, generating the electric current which was travelling over the intervening hill to the motor in the battery house. The dynamos are situated in an iron building at the foot of a perpendicular cliff, about 200 feet high. An open ground race, about half a mile in length, brings the water from the creek to the top of the cliff, and it is then conveyed to the Pelton wheels which drive the generators in a couple of wrought iron pipes, 22 inches in diameter at the top and tapering down to 6 inches at the bottom. An almost perpendicular fall of 180 feet is obtained, and the 4 or 5 heads of water coming down the pipes send the Pelton wheels round with great velocity. These Pelton wheels are of simple construction, and Mr. Evans' great faith in their usefulness seems not to have been misplaced. A 2.5-inch nozzle throws the water into the buckets of the wheels, sending them round at the rate of 370 turns to the minute. Each wheel is capable of exerting 50 horsepower, though at the present time they are working at much less than that. The generators are the well-known brush dynamos of a large size and are capable of being driven at a speed of from 700 to 800 revolutions per minute. If used as lighting machines, they would generate enough electricity to maintain 80 powerful arc lights. In other words, they would be sufficient for the lighting of the city of Dunedin. or for the purposes of driving the whole of the city and suburban trams. The machine house is about 8,000 feet above sea level, so it may be judged that it was a matter of no small difficulty to get the heavier parts of the machinery to their destination. The greatest skill is required in driving the little trolleys over some of the steepest gradients of the skipper's track. And no matter what amount of care is taken, it is impossible to prevent accidents. One of the trolleys, carrying a piece of iron of nearly a ton weight, fell over the track for a distance of 50 or 60 feet, dragging the 4 horses attached to it down the embankment. Horses, trolley and driver were nearly precipitated into the shotover, and it is a wonder that there was no loss of life. But even at the present time, considerable danger is attached to the work, and the drivers standing on the trolleys guiding their teams around some of the sharp declivities, with only a few inches between them and a giddy precipice, must frequently have their hearts in their mouths. Some of the flywheels weighed as much as 3,500 weight. That's 1,778 kilograms these days. And at one point on the road, they had to be taken off the trolleys, rolled over a suspension bridge, and then put on the trolleys again on the other side. The working of the battery with electricity was preceded by another modern triumph, the lighting of the mine. A smaller dynamo had been put to work on the closer creek, and it was estimated that it would pay for itself within a year by the savings on lamp oil and candles. Other miners watched progress with great interest. And I am the dynamic, hopefully electrifying, and never static Grego Campbell for Heritage Matters.
In August 1945, just after World War II ended, Dunedin was treated to a visit by the famous English singer Gracie Fields. A crowd, estimated at 5,000, gathered outside her hotel to greet the enormously talented Gracie, and the town hall was packed out for her concert. This report from Judy Southworth.
If you listened to the weekend radio request session when you were young, you probably heard this song many times. Even before the war, Gracie Fields had developed an enormous worldwide audience as an actress, singer and comedian. Her talents and her voice could be adapted to a wide variety of songs. A star of cinema and music hall, she was one of the top 10 film stars in Britain during the 1930s and was considered the highest paid film star in the world. Born over a fish and chip shop in Rochdale, Fields was known affectionately as Our Gracie and the Lancashire Lass, and for never losing her strong native Lancashire accent. She began her career in local repertory and concerts and was soon able to give up her job at a cotton mill and work as an actress and singer full-time. But it was as a comedian that she first shone.
What can you give a nudist when his birthday comes along? What can you give a nudist for his birthday? What sort of birthday present can you buy? I bought a pair of braces just like a silly pup. But what's the good of braces if there's not one holding up?
By the time of her Dunedin visit, she was a superstar, and the war-weary public were there to greet her.
The arrival of the darling of the London and Manchester stages was the occasion of one of the most remarkable demonstrations the city has seen since royalty was last here. 3/4 of an hour before she was due to reach Dunedin, the crowds began to assemble outside the City Hotel, where she was to stay. By the time the secondary schools released several hundred more juvenile fans, the congestion in Princes Street from the Dowling Street intersection to Moray Place was beginning to present a traffic problem. A strong body of police was necessary to control the crowds.
That night, the packed town hall was treated to a wide variety of songs and comedy skits as well. Her Lancashire accent came in handy for these.
I don't want to die an old maid, so I sing him this serenade. Walter, Walter, lead me to the altar. I don't cost much to keep in food. Walter, Walter, Mother says you ought to, so take me while she's in the mood.
But the terrible war just ended was not forgotten, and patriotic songs were peppered throughout the performance.
There'll always be an England while there's a country lane. Wherever there's a cottage small beside a field of grain.
And of course there were moments of heady jingoism and identifying with what was still called the old country. Gracie's signature song that the audience most wanted to hear, and her first note of Sally was drowned out in deafening applause.
Sally, Sally, pride of our land, you're more than the whole world to me.
When Gracie's tour of New Zealand ended, she donated the proceeds of over $2 million for the New Zealand Patriotic Fund. The size of the crowd that welcomed her in Dunedin was not matched until the Beatles visited many years later. She lived a long life, dying in 1979 at the age of 81. This is Judy Southworth reporting.
Now here's Sarah Gallagher from Heritage New Zealand with a roundup of local heritage news.
Edward Allison, ONZM, Upoko for Te Runaka o Otago, has been appointed Chair of the Māori Heritage Council and Deputy Chair of the Heritage New Zealand Pohere Taonga Board. He replaces outgoing Sir John Clarke. Minister of Culture and Heritage Paul Goldsmith said, Edward is a highly respected chair who will bring a wealth of governance and cultural experience to these roles. He has been on numerous boards over the years with a common theme of protecting and promoting Māori heritage, which earned him a New Zealand Order of Merit in 2015. I'm confident he will be a perfect fit for the role on the council and board, which have responsibilities for historic places and areas of spiritual, cultural and historical significance for Māori. Paul Goldsmith went on to say, I thank Sir John Clarke for his time serving in these roles since 2014. He has been incredibly influential in his services to Māori and heritage preservation throughout his career, which earned him a knighthood in 2018. In other Heritage New Zealand Pohere Taonga news, if you own a heritage-listed building, you can contact us to purchase a bronze plaque engraved with your list number. Either contact our Dunedin office or visit our website. You can find an online order form for plaques under the Places tab. Plaques cost $250. With the Otipoti Dunedin Heritage Festival coming up soon, Heritage New Zealand Pohere Taonga is running our successful Documenting Our Heritage photo competition again, and this opens on Sunday the 1st of September. and will be open until the 29th of September for submissions. A prize giving will be held as part of the Heritage Festival on the 8th of October at the Otago Arts Society. Submitted photos will be displayed digitally at the Dunedin Public Library during the Heritage Festival between the 3rd and the 28th of October on the big digital cube on the ground floor. The photos will also be available in the Dunedin Public Library's digital archive Scattered Seeds, He Pura Pura Mahana, and selected images will be added to the New Zealand Heritage List online, Rārangi Kōrero. Prizes will be offered for the open category and the youth category, and these are family entry to Heritage New Zealand Properties, Tōtara Estate, Clark's Mill and Hayes Engineering. And we're being sponsored by Happy Moose, a local company who specialise in making creative and fun photo print products, helping you turn your favourite memories into cherished treasures. All their prints are handcrafted in the Dunedin Print Studio, New Zealand's only online Hana Mueller Gold certified print studio. You can find out how to submit by checking our website, heritage.org.nz, Heritage New Zealand's Facebook page for details. Next month's Visions for Dunedin, Our Heritage, Our Future monthly talk series, archaeologists Megan Lawrence and Bree Wooler from New Zealand Heritage Properties will be talking about their work as archaeologists at the new Dunedin Hospital site. This is Sarah Gallagher reporting for Heritage Matters.
John Barr, an early Dunedin immigrant from Scotland, was a poet who liked to mimic Scotland's most famous poet. Grego Campbell starts his piece reading a John Barr poem with what he insists is a believable Scottish accent.
There is nae place like Otago yet. There is nae wee beggar weans, or old men shivering out o' doors to beg for scraps o' beans. We never see poor working folk with bochels on their feet, like perfect icicles wi' cold, going starving through the street. We never hear o' breaking stanes a shilling by the yard, o' poor folk roupit to the door to pay the needful laird. Nae purse-proud upstart mushroom lord to scowl at honest toil, or bracket down that he, the wretch, may feed on roast and boil. My curse upon them, root and branch, a tyrant I abhor. May despotism's iron fist ne'er mark Otago's shore. May wealth and labour hand in hand work out our glorious plan, but never let it be allowed that money makes the man. These words were from the pen of John Barr, sometimes referred to as Otago's first poet, and were written, as much of his work was, in the style of Robert Burns. Indeed, Barr was often referred to as the Bard of Otago. John Barr had been a successful shipbuilder in Scotland, but a financial reverse saw his business fail, and he, like many people at the time, took the opportunity to reinvent himself in a new land. Not long after arriving in Dunedin, he was extolling its virtues in poetry, and the Otago Witness in May of 1860 was to say, "We may mention that our first ship is already filled up with a first-class set of immigrants. In the June ship, a fine set of men will also leave, shepherds, ploughmen, etc., a number from Berwickshire of the right sort, all A1. Mr. John Barr's effusion, 'There's nae place like Otago yet,' has told. It comes home to Scotchmen's hearts. It was a capital advertisement and appeared in several of our papers." In 1861, Barr was seeking subscribers for a printed poem of his poetry to be published in Scotland. It arrived in Dunedin just in time for that town and its Scottish character to be swamped with miners coming in their thousands for the new goldfields of Otago. Swamped it may have been, or at least It lost its primacy in the Edinburgh of the South, but Scottishness remained strong in Dunedin, and John Barr was a leading exponent. When men gathered in 1868 to commemorate Scotland's bard, John Barr was in the chair, and the witness was there to record it. When the toast of the evening, the poet Burns, was given, the chairman, in proposing the toast in earnest and forcible language, eulogised the memory of the great poet, defending him from the charge of inebriety, which he, the chairman, contended was more the fault of the days in which Burns lived, when, in contrast with the present time, it was not considered a disgrace to prolong festivities to an unusual extent. Yet the poet always preserved his faculties, and this slander raised against him was in revenge for the manly and fearless way in which he tore the mantle of hypocrisy off the shoulders of the rich and great, exposing their vice and ignorance, and for his audacity in comparing to their tinsel grandeur the poor man's nobility. Deep silence was preserved throughout his address, and on resuming his seat, New Zealand's bard was long and loudly applauded for an extemporaneous effort which, for beauty and force of language, could not be surpassed. Barr also went under the name of Craigie Lee, named after a farm to the south of Balclutha which he occupied for only a few years. Sometime after he had departed, the witness again published this. I said at the commencement of this article that Kaihiku would be about the last locality one would imagine that a poet would elect to reside in. Yet, in the old identity times in Kaihiku, a poet once abode whose songs, if scarcely capable of electrifying their readers, must at least have helped those in those primeval and simple days when literature of an enlivening kind must have been conspicuous by its dearth, to lighten many a fireside by its broad caricatures or satirical hits. The author of The Old Identities, from which I've already quoted, a work that, with its pleasant descriptions of those friendly old days, deserves a place in the library of every settler in Otago, remarks of Mr. John Barr that if not possessed of the genius of Burns, he had at least a happy knack of rhyming in Scotch. There are a few who have read Mr. Barr's poems that will readily grant this compliment to their author. If a little coarse in the fibre of their composition, they at least exhibit a force of character that proves Mr. Barr had the power of fully infusing what he wished to express into his metrical productions, and this, in my opinion, is no mean trait of a true poet. And for this reason, the manners of the people and the everyday life of those days are well represented in Mr. Barr's poems. That will entitle their author to some niche in the public memory when he finally quits the stage of life for the undoubted benefits of his muse to them in those days. Of Mr. Barr's merits as a writer, I would here remark that the same cause that was the occasion of his prominence seems to me to have been chiefly also that of his weakness. His being alone then as a provincial poet, or opposed only by such as he was easily enough enabled to excel, he too surely, in his writings, shows the conviction that if the mantle of the Ayrshire ploughman had not exactly fallen upon his shoulders, it had at least dropped at no very great distance from them. Hence, instead of conceiving that, with the gift he undoubtedly had, added to by sedulous improvement, he might possibly attain to some degree of respectability as a poet, deeming his position to be his own already, he evidently mistook what was merely caricature and farce for productions of choice humour and witty satire. Mr. Moffat pointed out to me the site where Mr. Barr's residence once stood, and in which so many of his productions, bearing in his book the name of South Craigie Lee before the date, were written, giving me the same time some anecdotes of the genial old fellow, who seemingly, from their evidence, was not wholly free from those eccentricities of character for which so many of the rhyming fraternity are so peculiar. Of his old cottage close beside Mr. Moffat's residence, beside the Kaihiku bush, now scarcely a vestige remains, although for years after his leaving Kaihiku it did duty as a church for the district. It is now about 22 years since Mr. Barr left Kaihiku, having resided in all about 7 years in the district. In lieu of his old house, however, Kaihiku is now supplied with a church of her own, and which, for architectural taste, is about the prettiest building I have seen within any of the country districts in Otago. The criticism by Pedler of Barr's skill as a poet, this author cannot entirely disagree with. His works are very much of their time and place, of a culture far from home and yet to find its independent voice. And I have to say, I have heard much worse from later poets whose works were considered great because they dealt with great events such as shipwrecks. In those works, word order could go to hell if the lines rhymed, and historic veracity took second place to drama. John Barr spent his last years at Ravensbourne and now lies in Dunedin's Northern Cemetery. And I am the still very above ground Grego Campbell for Heritage Matters.
The award-winning Heritage Matters is broadcast on the first Monday of each month at 9:30 a.m. and replayed on the following Sunday at 7 p.m. There are further replays on the third week of the month, Thursday at 1 p.m. and Sunday at 7 p.m. Or you can listen as a podcast from the Otago Access Radio website at oar.org.nz.
As Aotearoa New Zealand's national heritage agency, Heritage New Zealand Pohere Taonga is proud to sponsor Heritage Matters. Celebrate our heritage by becoming a member to visit more than 20 heritage places we care for across the motu for free. You'll receive a subscription to our award-winning magazine, exclusive member events, and free or discounted admission to over 1,000 international heritage places. Support the heritage of Aotearoa New Zealand. Check out visitheritage.co.nz.
This podcast was produced by OAR FM Dunedin with support from New Zealand On the Air.